And so I ran into a lot of trouble in the military because I was the guy. It's like, all right, you guys are going to do this. And I'm like, does anybody have any questions? Yeah. Why are we doing this stupid shit, Gunny? Like, it's dumb for this, and this reason.
I love
Yeah.
that.
No, that was me. It's funny because I actually got a meritorious mast, which was like, a attaboy from being a smartass, you
Good.
know, like, because there was a captain, he was doing a drill with us, and he's like, okay, well, I want to, like come up with something where we're going to do the range other than just shooting, you know. And I said, and he was like asking for suggestions. And I said, that's dumb. Like, we wouldn't do any of that. And he says, well, why don't you plan out, Lance Corporal? And I said, I will. And I did. And like wrote the 5-paragraph order, did all this stuff. And, you know, cause it was like, I was like, oh, I know how to do this, blah, blah, blah. And he later like wrote me a meritorious mass for having initiated all this stuff. And I was like, that's different. Cause I was used to getting in trouble with those moments. But like when I worked at middle management in corporate America is what opened my eyes to where like not only are systems designed to not function effectively, they actively stop you if you try to make a change and try to make things better, especially for people on the ground.
Yeah.
Even when laws are being broken. You know, I was in a case where I was called in on a class action lawsuit for workers, and and one of the guys who I respected and worked with me was a crew chief. He's like, "Hey man, will you testify on our behalf?" I was like, "Yeah, fuck it, man. I'm sure. You guys showed up for me." So, and basically what it was is in California, you're supposed to get two 15-minute on the clock breaks.
Mhm.
And basically on the ramp, like the way it was structured for the company I work for, there was literally no way you could get it. And their response was, well, they're taking their break on the ramp. And it's like, no, according to the union contract, you're supposed to be able to go to a break area, you know, otherwise you had to pay them. And so essentially they were, because they were so lean and short staffed, these guys had to work through their breaks,
Mm.
and they couldn't go to their break area to take it. And so, but there were in the union contract, if that happened, you were supposed to get paid that plus a penalty.
Right.
These guys were doing that twice a day, every day for their 8-hour shift. So you're talking about thousands of dollars a year and essentially wage theft.
Right. Of course. Of course. And I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like so many, I am pro union. I pay union dues, but I also know that, at least in teaching, my union has largely been symbolic because we've seen a sort of authoritarian creep in unions, even
Yep.
where the union, the president, confuses access to the boss as power
Yep.
instead of understanding the power that he or she or they have from, actually, representing their constituents, which is where they have their actual power and they're paying dues members. Anyway, all this to say, I hope the union backed them up in that case, and I'm glad that you did what you
They
did.
did. I think a judge ultimately, it just never went anywhere because it was like, oh, it's not enough proof. And it's like,
Yeah.
but yeah, but you literally had like all these statements and me from management, former management that was saying like, you know, and it was, of course they tried to, besmirch me and say, well, you allowed this to happen. I'm like, yeah, because I had no choice. It's like, did you know you're breaking the law? I'm like, yeah, I had
But you
quotas
weren't
to
the one
meet.
issuing paychecks, you know?
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I wasn't. I said, I worked with what they gave me, you know,
Yeah,
and I asked these guys to, do these things, and that's why I signed it. And I got pushback on signing meal break penalties and doing all this stuff, and ultimately it's what eventually led to my ouster as a manager because I just wasn't. I was like, I was like, no, I was like, I'm not going to break the law to that extent to where I'm depriving these guys of, money, right?
sure.
So, because I used to be an agent and I understand what the struggle was, you know, where it's And I mean, and again, and that's the thing with the, Americas we're getting off, like, why this is so powerful right now, I think, in this moment is I work with guys who are like 24 years old working 40 hours a week and technically a union, what not technically, it was a union job where you were skilled labor. You had to get certified and trained to work aircraft and heavy equipment and everything else. And they couldn't move out of their parents' house.
Mm,
They're working a full-time skilled labor job, a union job, and they can't afford a single and this was in 2019,
mhm,
right?
mm,
So, I mean, you're talking they can't even afford a single bedroom apartment
yeah,
outside of Los
yeah,
Angeles County, you know?
yeah,
And so they're having to live with their parents,
mhm, mhm,
and they're taking whatever mass transit they can take in because they can't afford a car. And I had a lot of guys that would move to, other states, and it's like, "Hey, man, why are you leaving?" It's like, "Man, I can't afford to live here." I saw the same thing in Washington, D.C. in 2013. So it's like I've kinda had that on the ground view with labor as they were being priced out of, being able to live on just a worker's a working man's salary for like 40 hours a week. I
yeah,
saw it.
yeah, and that is increasingly the case too, even in other industries, like, trained industries like education. I mean, even at the level of college, so I teach at community college now, but even when I taught at, like, a research institution, my salary has been lower than a high school teacher in the town where I grew up. And when I got hired with there was a new guy who, it was his first tenure stream job, and he was like, "I can't even afford." He's like, "I have a wife and a kid, and, like, even after my parents died and I inherited their car so I could drive to this place, like, I can barely afford the mortgage on this place, and the mortgage was cheaper than the rent, you know?
Yeah.
So this is and I think a lot of, what JD Vance is doing right now is the Darvo of blaming immigrants for this when it's actually venture capitalists who are buying up housing and intentionally pricing people out of housing so that they feel desperate. And it really pisses me off that there are people in the media who aren't willing to make that connection very plainly because you can pop that fucking balloon real quick.
Oh, yeah. Easily. And, I mean, it's funny because I remember and this is back in '04 when they started putting out of this, like, these how to effectively be one of the poors, and that was an article that was in USA Today, and it was one of the tips they gave is don't be too proud to dumpster dive. Like, and I
Mhm.
still remember that because it incensed me, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm supposed to settle for trash. Like, meanwhile, this past year, I- and this is what one of the things is just not sustainable. And Robert Reich's talked about this, like the fast food economy, the McDonald's economy, where it's like you have like the money class, the oligarchy's like, well, Americans are overweight. Don't be afraid to skip a meal. Skip breakfast. And then yet McDonald's comes out and says, we're losing money because people are skipping breakfast.
Mm.
Not, because they have to, because they can't afford to, pay for like, well, I'm working 12 hours and I've worked those where I've like worked double shifts and I've had to get takeout because it's like I ate at home, I had a lunch, and then the boss is like, do you want to pick up an extra shift? I'm like, yeah, okay. And then I can't go home and fix myself more food. So now it's like, I've got to start calculating, like, all right, I'm going to get this much in overtime. How much do I want to spend on, a fast food meal or something that I got to get? I got to make it cheap, even though it's not healthy because it's like, well, you know, I'm making overtime, trying to make money, you know, and if I spend money to eat out, it's like, all right, I'm basically working for free, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of people are, at that place of like, e I mean, I don't know how you said this was like circa 2019 or was this yeah,
Oh, the one with the guys that work full time couldn't afford a house or
yeah.
an apartment. Yeah, that was circa 19 because I was in Los Angeles. I hit the ground about a year after the rent started. So I hit it in 2017 and the rent started climbing. And I was sort of like the first wave of white folks that started moving into Hispanic neighborhoods in like Hawthorne. I moved there because like Hawthorne is like southeast from the airport. It's like 5 minutes away. And the way my after working in aviation and moving around a lot, my mind was like, you live close to your job because you're there most of the time. And then on your days off, you can just kind of go further afield, right? Because there's the mistake people made in like say Michigan is like, oh, Royal Oak was so dope. It was like the sort of hipster kind of up and coming neighborhood. The problem with that is the DTW was in Romulus. So like here's Romulus, here's Detroit, and then here's Royal Oak. So you literally had to go through Detroit to get to work. Whereas I lived in Belleville where I was literally at exit down and just like, and it's like if I wanted to go to Royal Oak, I would just go on my day off and just like, all right, well, you know. But I lived in Hawthorne and the site and Hawthorne, a lot of people didn't know this is it was the site of the largest internment camp in the United States during World War II. So for a long time it was uh Asian American, like post World War II. And then it came like the main drag, it sort of split, sort of because of redlining, where it was like you had Asian Americans still on this side and then Hispanics on this side. And the apartment I got was in the Hispanic neighborhood. And so I saw it kind of happen in real time where, suddenly where it was hard to find a parking spot, it became damn near impossible because
Yeah.
people were parking their vans and living in their vans.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
like me and the roommate I had, we're both veterans. We were the only white boys in the neighborhood. And we used to get the looks from like other folks like, what the hell are you guys doing here?
Right,
Like,
are you gentrifying my neighborhood?
yeah, are you
What
gentrifying? Or are you
yeah,
cops? Like, what are, because we're
yeah,
both former
yeah,
military and we kind of have that look about us. By 2020, when I left in the pandemic, it was like there were more young people of like white that were moving in and the neighborhood was mixing more. And that's because you couldn't afford to live in what was once cheap anywhere else in the city, right? Venice Beach, what used to be a cheap beach community, rents skyrocketed. Like it was like what I was paying was double to get the same in Venice or in Santa
yeah,
Monica or in any of those other places. Like it was just, and you're paying double, like 2,500. Like at that time, you're paying 2,500 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment that was built in like the late 60s. It
yeah.
was nuts. I mean, it was crazy. And
Yeah,
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 and
and
I think it is meant to I mean, like, just at the level of, "That sucks," yes, but also, this is an intentional strategy because when you mess with people's ability to be housed and to be able to afford food and also with the affording food thing, if you look at the United States, and I believe this is also the case in Canada, the major owners of housing, and food and media are all
yeah,
oligarchs, and they are intentionally fucking with your ability to be housed and to have, like, food and medical
mm,
care, and they know that if they mess with that, it makes you more predictable and easier to control. I mean, that's in the behavioral ops, manual, right?
mhm, yeah,
I mean, which is the thing that I mean, I am not a veteran, but I, have made it my duty to understand behavioral ops because I think so much of what is happening is a s is, in part psychological and meant to terrify people if we're easing into the conversation about Minnesota.
yeah, yeah,
And because I feel like and I'm not saying that the stuff on the ground is not physical, does not have life and death consequences, but when you scare the shit out of people, you remove their ability to strategize. And these are already people who are being pressed now with healthcare on purpose and
mhm,
housing and all this. So it's just this is such an intentional um I don't know what you think about the word hybrid war in relation to what is happening to civilians in the United States, but it feels like a hybrid war is being waged on the United States from within the United States by this sort of gangster regime. I mean, what are your thoughts on that as a veteran?
I think like so the difficult part with this, and this is kind of where I come from, is how much of this is really just sort of intentional, and how much of this is just that's a byproduct of like I think people are like, even leaders are way more simplistic, and they're more short-sighted than they are long-term thinkers.
Oh, for sure.
And so, but that doesn't mean what they're doing isn't intentional, right? Because I think when people hear intentional, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but they think of like Lex Luthor, or it's like they're playing four-dimensional chess and they've got 20
Right.
years and like eighteen different steps and they're going to fall into line. And while that make for a good movie, that's not really reality. However, I think the oligarchs have seen the writing on the wall, and most of them are either devoid of morality or have rationalized a very sort of sociopathy in their,
Yes.
like, whatever their morality is, and they've made the calculus that it's like, "Hey, we used to have corporatists on both parties, and they kept order, and but the scale was tilted in our favor, and we would make more money." I think now they're saying like, "Oh, we can make even more money through fascism. Let's do that." It's
Yeah.
really that simple, and so they're just like, "Sure, we'll go all in on fascism." We'll like it's fascinating because, and why I say short-sighted is, so when Luigi Mangione allegedly, like assassinated Brian Thompson, right?
Mhm.
You know, I mean, I don't think he's guilty. I'd nullify that if I was on the jury, but my buddies run I have friends that run security companies. They do executive protection. Skyrocketed right after that happened. And the moment it kind of died down and you didn't see a slew of them, they said, "Yeah, we don't need you anymore. We're going to cut contracts, blah, blah, blah." Right?
Mm.
Because that's how they think, right? So it's like, if you can starve children and make more money and make like half a percentage point more, they'll do that. They
Yeah.
don't order.
But
If
look
you
at obvious with the
Yeah,
book.
it's like, "Oh, what? Oh, we get to have these houses and then jack up the rates so then we can borrow more money because we have technically more in assets even though it's inflated." Sure. Or, "Hey, let's do thousands of trades with these supercomputers and jack and where the Wall Street doesn't even represent what's happening on the ground." And so, to your point, the fact that with corporate consolidation, it was supposed to be, "Oh, this will make it cheaper and better. If we give the corporations all this power, then they'll make it our food cheaper."
Bullshit.
That's not, yeah, that hasn't happened. Like, the opposite of that has happened. And it's the same with everything else. And so now we find ourselves in this situation to where, whether they're actually writing out a war plan to take it to us, or it's just a product of, "What? These poors don't want us to make gobs of money? Well, then put the billy club to them. Put the boot to
Sure.
them." You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And I
Well,
think
and
it's that. It's because they've justified it to where it's like Donald Trump in this peace prize, right? Well, I absolutely deserve it, you know? It's like, these people don't, but I do, so I should get it.
yeah,
And
he's
that's
fucking
how,
pathetic.
yeah, that's how these oligarchs think is, "Well, I deserve this money. You guys, you need to work for it, but I deserve it because I worked for it."
Mm. Mm. Yeah, yeah. And I kind of feel like I wanna add, like, a little just a tiny bit of, like, an aside or an adjacent rider to that. Like, I feel like with the oligarchic class, I mean, many of them, if you look at Elon Musk, I mean, he's just a pathetic little guy with daddy
Oh my
issues who's
god.
such a fucking tryhard. And the thing is that he never actually created any of the wealth. He just fucking
Yeah,
came in and pooped it just like Zuck stole an idea from somebody else. And my point here is I agree with you that they don't think through those things. However, comma, as somebody who has spent since oh my god, since like 2004, I have been researching Christian nationalists. The Heritage Foundation absolutely does have like a 10 and 20-point plan, and collapsing
Yes.
food systems and collapsing housing systems are actually an intentional part of that strategy because they are trying to push. It's amazing to me because I don't exactly know what they are trying to do, because uh if they want the women folk to go back to the kitchen, how do you do that when you can't afford fucking rent? How do you do that when you can't afford fucking food? And I'm not saying that I'm advocating for that. I think that the Christian the Heritage Foundation is a terrorist organization in a tie, if I'm
Yeah.
being real here.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. 100%. And I think that's where sort of the limits of human endeavor and imagination sort of run out, right? And this is where our cognitive dissonance, like, really kind of comes into play, because you're not. It's like, well, I want this, and I also want this, right? I want women back in the kitchen and not working, and to have this the white supremacy and no immigrants. But I also want this amazing economy, and I don't, and I want this, and I want it's like, yeah, but one of the reasons women left the home to go back in the workforce was because you couldn't make it on one paycheck anymore. That started to creep in the 70s and 80s, and it's just
sure.
skyrocketed. Part of it was, yeah, there's women that say, I don't want to be a wife, don't want to be a mother. But there's just as many, if not more, that were like, I got to get a part-time job because we can't afford to make rent, or we can't afford the mortgage, or we're going to lose the car, you know? And so that changed our society. Or the fact that the economic reality is we rely on immigrants to keep what we're doing. Like, we can't keep business in what we do without immigrants. And so the thing is, you've got these people that partly like are more ruled by their id and rationalization, right? I mean, Donald Trump is like, I just go with what I think. But you're a fucking moron. So, like, that's not a good thing, you know, to like, oh, I'm just gonna do what I think. And I think a lot of these billionaires, that's what they do. It's just like, oh, like, can I grab it? Can I do it? Same with the Heritage Foundation. It's like, I want to see if we can do this. And then as they're doing their 20-point plan, they're convincing themselves it's gonna work out like this. It's like, if you've studied history or human behavior at all, bro, it may not. It may go in directions you never even thought about it's gonna go. Because it's like, yeah, you might control people if you starve them, or they might get really mad and storm the Bastille.
Yeah.
You
Well, and
know?
I mean, I think another thing too is that they're not what that the other piece, in terms of beyond or before storming the Bastille, is that like it also doesn't they don't imagine the agency of everyday people who are like, actually, you know what, as it turns out, we can build parallel food systems and feed each other, because that is a thing that
Right.
people can do. Just alongside the same thing with like medical care, with developing different like forms of decentralized housing with like roommate networks and all sorts of stuff. And I think that that is one of the things that I really want to press in terms of Minnesota, because I feel like the politicians are really scared that if they call in the guard, that in Minnesota, that half the guard is going to split. I've heard this a lot, that half the guard is going to split and not protect the Minnesotans, and that it would unleash some sort of civil war sort of situation if they did that. I don't know if that's true. But
Yeah.
what I do know is that thoughts and praying your constituents and telling them to be vocal and to protest peacefully, they are protesting peacefully. I feel like anti-Blackness in particular has mobilized this idea that there are non-peaceful protesters, when what we have seen over and over again on loop in this country is law enforcement who has, unfortunately, because of training that has become increasingly militarized, started to see free speech as a form of like combatant behavior, and they escalate when they don't. And what happens when you escalate is you also escalate the situation with other people. So I'm a little pissed about the reminder for peaceful protest. I get it, but like it makes it suggest that they weren't already being peaceful. But the other piece that is really upsetting to me, and I guess I'll pause to see what you think because I'm saying a lot of words,
You're
but
good.
I really feel like it is time for elected politicians to simply say this phrase. It is time for you and your neighbors to build parallel systems of support in your neighborhood because these people are trying to break us. Because that's different than asking them to vote. It's different than asking them to protest peacefully and to call their elected officials. Because what we need in this moment, if we're going to maintain our democracy, is a kind of pre political, by which I mean pre electoral system in the neighborhood to rebuild that fabric so that we can hold the fucking line. And we people don't have housing and healthcare and food, and they don't have any kind of backup plan for safe passage or understand how ICE is surveilling them,
Mhm.
it's gonna collapse. And so as somebody who's a strategic thinker and a community organizer who's been trained by the Albert Einstein Institution and the International Center for Nonviolence, I'm like, "Come on, guys. Like, have you not answered the phone to anyone who works in strategic nonviolence to help you understand what to do when you're being invaded by an armed force and you know that you can't take up pew-pews to a drone fight, so you so you need some sort of situation because when people are saying one of us, all of you have to trust that they fucking mean it because these people are playing for all the marbles. So for me, I'm frustrated because I want some battle planning, and I mean like non-armed battle planning situation because people need to be doing shit and like understanding that their neighborhood is a battlefield because it's being made a battlefield and to strategize around those areas. BTW friends, if you're in this call and you are interested in that stuff, please follow me because it's all I talk about. I swear I feel like I'm selling Tupperware, but I'm really I'm really trying to get I'm really trying to get people to understand that they have agency here. And I think that if my experiences have taught me anything, it is that the rich and powerful assume that you have no agency because they don't have any agency. They don't.
No, they
They
don't.
need people to do shit for them. So
Yeah.
they assume that we're in the same bucket as them. So I agree with you that they cannot anticipate what is gonna happen, but I want us all to collectively anticipate that we recover our agency and stop looking at our elected officials and law enforcement and military as our mommies and daddies and realize that we have agency ourselves. So I'm gonna I def now I cede my time.
I love it. I applaud that. That was great. No,
Thank you.
that was awesome. No, a buddy of mine said something that was while I was talking to him, he said something pretty profound. He said, at a certain point when politicians and keep failing the people consistently, the people move past them. And that's what you're
Yes.
talking about,
Yeah,
is
and I
moving
love
past the politicians, right? And I think why that's necessary is one, whether you say, "Oh, we should have been doing this the whole time." Yeah, that's fine. We have a representative democracy. I understand why we weren't, but we find
yeah,
ourselves in this moment.
agreed.
And the thing about this is, you know, a lot of these politicians, Tim Walz included, have built they've lived their lives and built their careers and done these things in a system that, for white men at least, was relatively m- m- it was a meritocracy a little bit, right? At least it was stable, and the guardrails there and the rules were there. Like, if you get lucky and you play the game right, you can move up, and if you hold your p's and q's, eventually maybe you will get to do something. And that's where Waltz kind of found himself, right? He's governor of Minnesota. Yeah, look, he's a great dude. Personally,
He seems
personal,
very sweet. Yeah, he seems I'm
awesome
not,
human
like,
being.
critiquing his character. Yeah.
But there comes a moment in warfare, and if you really believe this is a hybrid war, which I think it is, you know, doesn't matter like how much strategy or whether it's like off the cuff or whatever. You have to think about what's happening and what's the likely result.
Yeah.
So if we're really in a fight, one of the things that you see in military history over and over and over that fails is you fight the last war. That system and those means of resistance are done. Like, we are now in a new phase. We are now in fascism. And that's not to say nonviolence doesn't have its place. I'm not saying to go get violent. What I am saying is this: if you think you're going to find political leaders in the likes of Chuck Schumer and Cory Booker and people that are just crossing their fingers and hoping to God that Trump will stop being an idiot so they can keep sending us texts saying, would you please send me $5? You know, that those people will not step up for us. They will not.
No, they won't.
So because the thing is, this moment, you would need the governor like Tim Walz to go, "Oh, you wanna do this? Cool, bet. Alright, I'm gonna call up the National Guard for any volunteers that want to do this. I'm gonna send them out as basically observers. They're gonna follow ICE, and they're gonna record, and they're gonna film, and they're going to protect any citizens, and then tell the commanders that if they feel they need to step in, step in." And you because here's one thing Trump has shown over and over: he's weak. He's a bully, but he's weak. And he's not a negotiator. He always has some kind of thing in his head. I'm going to get this. Like, he'll sue people and just to see if they'll pay him. But everybody that stands up to him and makes it to where he actually has to work for it, he folds
Right.
every single time. All it's going to take is one governor to be like, do it. I'll call the guard. I'll call state police. I'll call the local media. I'll call everybody I possibly can and put every camera I can. You know what? I'll be out there with them. And I want all my cabinet out there with them. I want the lieutenant governor. I want the AG. I want everybody out there. And you want to arrest me? Go ahead. Make sure the cameras are there and I'll talk to them too. That's the kind of, and if you did that, Trump would be like, oh, okay. Well, I'll call ICE back. But
Yeah, I
nobody's
mean,
done that.
I
Nobody
mean,
will.
yeah, I think that you are. This is the part that I agree in the sense that I think that the foolish shit is folks saying shit about Second Amendment shit as civilians. That to me feels like a really dumb idea. And I've heard I work with Green Berets. I and I don't know if any of y'all know what Green Berets do, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah. But I mean, like, do you want to tell them what Green Berets do in the?
Basically, it's special forces, but also part of their training is what they do is they go into countries before like a ground invasion starts, and they train quote unquote irregular forces like partisans, guerrillas, right? They basically train, the insurgency. Like
Yeah,
that's a big part of their mission. Like they do like commando raids and everything else is like that's yeah, that's more Delta and SEALs and everything else. But Green Berets are kind of in there for the long haul, you know,
yeah,
like they're
yeah,
embedded first, and
yeah,
they send intelligence, prep for the ground invasion, but then also train the resistance groups and have them coordinate with the US. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So like in my dad was a Green Beret, and I guess the thing is I'm what I'm suggesting is that like when I'm hearing from Green Berets and doing the work that I'm doing with parallel systems of support, and they're like, yeah, pew pews are a very bad idea for civilians. Like
oh
they're
yeah.
not joking. But I think that like having National Guard out there, yes. And I think that if you're worried about starting a civil war, and this is risky, and I am not saying and again, I think of what you said about volunteer forces
Mhm.
is a good point to, like, allow them to choose, but I think that maybe asking and again, I am just workshopping this, but I want you to imagine a situation where uniformed National Guard show up unarmed, but with shields, standing and
Yeah.
lining neighborhoods so that it's like so that you create the optics because right now what they want and I'm just saying this from the level of strategy what they want is they've got these iced goon thugs out there who are not trained who are literally proud boys who are terrorizing the vulnerable, right?
Mhm.
That's what's happening right now. But if you have a situation and so they want to force you onto their battlefield, but it is an horse of a different color to have volunteer unarmed National Guard out there with shields who are like, okay, step to me, buddy. Do you want to shoot an unarmed guard? Force them into that fucking situation.
Yep.
And I mean that because then I feel like it forces a situation where it lets law enforcement see and it lets military see that these people do not have your fucking back and they will execute you in a hot fucking minute if you don't step to Orange, if you don't like follow Orange Daddy. You know, so I mean, I feel like there are actual things that you can do to both protect your community and de escalate. But I feel like at the pre political level or the pre electoral level, which is actually where our most power is, that the people need to be building communities of resilience so that they can hold the fucking line because
Yeah.
these people are playing for all the marbles. And while I think that everybody should be showing up to elections, I also think that there need to be planning for electoral malfeasance in terms of
Oh
like
God, yeah.
understanding and yeah, just in terms of not only building a way to track ballots just like they did in Serbia to know I think it was Serbia with was it Milosevic, Serbia? Is that
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so,
Yeah,
like,
so
I
good.
think yeah, so they were organized enough to have a plan for every precinct so that they were able to not only know the tally, but then report it out with independent news media infrastructure before state-captured media could say what the fake election results, which feels very important right now because Trump is absolutely pulling a Milosevic when it comes to taking up all like CNN to me is a standard bearer as a 46-year-old human of who calls the elections.
Right. I yeah, the thing is, for a lot of folks, it's like, why would you put the guard out there? And it's again, it's you have to think about the images that are coming out for Minnesota and why Renee Good sparked such an outcry immediately. And
Yeah.
part of that was because we had multiple angles almost right away. It was damn near
Right.
like live cast, right? Live streamed, because the videos went up almost right after she was shot from multiple folks. But the other part of it is because she's a Midwest blonde white woman,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you see four ICE goons dragging the guy who's they don't know if he's alive or not at the service station who's Hispanic, right? Beat the crap out of him. The instant for most Americans, like, oh, he's an immigrant, he's probably undocumented, right? Whether they say it out loud, that's where they're going to go. Now, take the image of an ICE goon who's wearing jeans and like a mask and this and that, and there's a National Guard guy with a riot shield and a vest, a yellow vest that says guard on it,
Mhm.
right? You That's going to be a whole horse of a different color if that ICE agent attacks that National Guardsman. Most
Right.
Americans are going to be like, what? Like, why is that happening? And
Right.
even that ICE agent is going to have a pause because it's one thing when you've otherized certain groups of people. That's why Jonathan Ross said effing bitch, right? After he murdered Renee Good. That's the sexism and misogyny coming out. That's him saying, rationalizing to himself, like in his sociopathy, oh, well, she's a woman that defied me. I had the right to execute her.
She's a gay woman. It was actually
Right.
he was mad at her wife for talking smack to him, and it wasn't even smack. It was just words that he needed to hear, and you know what? Not everybody gets to, have soft words spoken to them when they're
Oh,
breaking the fucking law.
oh well, she's exercising her First Amendment right. Get the fuck over it. She doesn't need to be executed.
So he murdered this woman's wife, it was like, "I
Right.
feel fragile in my masculinity, so the way that I'm gonna retaliate against you is to break you in the worst way possible by shooting your wife in the face," when she was saying, "Dude, I'm not mad at you." That's what it is. Ooh.
Absolutely. And so but you take that same guy and you line him up against a National Guardsman, right?
Oh,
And
yeah,
at
he would
Yeah,
like
it's now suddenly it's a horse of a different color, and that's not the press that they wanna get into, right? That's not the that is not happening. You have the governor say, "I'm gonna set up a mobile command center in the center of Minneapolis, And anywhere that there is an outbreak of ICE, my team and myself are going there. I'm
Yeah,
pausing all state business until ICE is out of Minneapolis and out of Minnesota. Then the narrative and the momentum would shift, right? It starts to shift. And then you have it suddenly Trump is like, oh, that's a little too much, man. Like, I was like, well, I'll try to federalize them. Good, go ahead. They're already being active against you. Let's go to court and let's pause that. Well, we got orders, and then you could have Tim Walz say, I don't recognize those orders. They're not legal. Screw you. And now you have a different fight and a different thing. But asking people who were already peacefully protesting to just peace harder, right? Don't
it
give
ain't
in to
gonna change.
violence. And here's the thing is like, yes, you and I know tactically and strategically violence when you start shooting at ICE, you start shooting at people, it doesn't go well. But if I'm sitting in my car with my child and my wife and my family and they throw a flashbang in there, and they're shooting it and they shoot it at me or my neighbor, somebody gets hurt. I'm not thinking rationally in that moment. I'm thinking, I'm lashing out and reacting. And that's why things are starting to escalate. And that's what makes it dangerous because the onus shouldn't be on the unarmed citizen who's just going about their daily life to be more peaceful. It's like, no, dude, you're the one with the weapons. You're the one that's supposed to have taken an oath. You're the one that's not supposed to just, shoot people because they're exercising their right to speak at you and you don't like what they have to say. Any
Right.
law
Well,
enforcement
yeah,
professional will tell you that. But these
yeah.
guys aren't law enforcement.
They're
They're
not.
Gestapo. Yeah,
Yeah, they're not. They're literal Nazis. Like we already have credible evidence that January 6th insurrectionists were hired. We already have a news story that came out that the leader of the Proud Boys is a member of ICE. So
of
if you're
course.
wondering why white supremacist militias weren't showing up when they've trained for this for years, it's because they're in your fucking streets as ICE.
Yeah,
And that's
that's why they're wearing masks, you know?
exactly because yeah, because they don't want to be identified, and stupid, creepy elf on a shelf Mike Johnson saying shit like, "Oh, we don't want them to be doxxed." No, listen, we don't have secret police in the fucking United States. And if you cannot do what you are gonna do without under the cover of darkness, then it's not a legitimate action, right?
Has
So, like,
has
that's my
has doxing ever been a problem for law enforcement until now? Until ICE? No.
right,
People have
yeah,
operated with badges and names and they've had and it's never been a problem until they do shit with like George Floyd. They do, or like all the other black men and women that have been freaking brutalized and murdered. Then it
right,
becomes a problem. Then your name gets in the paper. Then you get brought into the light of day.
right, and
And
then, like,
problem ICE is doing more and more of that. That's the problem, you
right.
know?
Well, and getting named in the paper and is one thing, but like, conservatives have for years, and also right-wing people have not only it's not just your name, it's character assassination, it's linking your socials, it's linking your address so that like I mean, like and I guess to me, it's like if you engage in state sanctioned violence,
Mhm.
yeah, I would wanna know if I was living next to an ICE agent personally. Like, I would wanna know, and I would, uh, be, much more, I think, prepared for that situation. But, yeah, like, I feel like this is a situation where and even if it's not National Guard, if we're talking strategy, ask fucking veterans. There are so many veterans right now who would line up unarmed with shields, with their shit on, like with their decorated whatever, unarmed out there being like, "Hey, we are going to be an unarmed volunteer peacekeeping force and we are going to stand here with riot shields protecting people, neighbors from ICE." Like, I don't understand why that mobilization hasn't happened. Because if I were I don't know, I wanna know what you think, because if I were a veteran, I would already have organized that, and I'm curious about if there are legal reasons why veterans cannot do that, But I am very curious about that, because if I had military training and combat training, I would have already organized a volunteer battalion that moved from state to state doing unarmed volunteer peacekeeping. So I'm just curious about like what you think about why that hasn't been happening. Because I see veterans on the ground, but they're mostly doing podcasts.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of it has to do with like, and you sort of see this when anytime something shifts, right? Some kind of seismic moment or shifts in politics and culture and whatever, and people retreat back. Most of them retreat back to what they know, right? So you have like Schumer and Booker, who are your corporatist
ugh,
Democrats, going, "Oh, it's a training issue," which means they're going to give more
bullshit.
money for that kind of crap. It's like, no, they're doing exactly what they are. Or you've gotten to where federal authority has become preeminent over, say, uh, state authority. And that's kind of a throwback to the civil rights era where you had governors defying the president and everything else. And like, so more executive power kind of got that. But so you have a guy like Tim Waltz where it's just like, let me appeal to the president and hope this ends. Like, hopefully we can ride it out and they'll go away. Cause they're thinking like, and they're probably have rationalized and convinced themselves that, well, if we don't provoke him, then eventually he'll get bored and go away. And that's not how it works. Because to your
No.
point, the governor, there's actually still state militias on the record, right? Like it was a big thing in the South, right? You're part of like it became sort of like an honorary thing. Like my dad he got like an honor where he was inducted in the state militia of Mississippi, right? And it's kind of thrown back, but it's like you can do that as emergency powers where you could, okay, I can't call out the National Guard, but here's what I can do. Um, I am going to form a citizens battalion or brigade of observers, and I'm going to give them state resources, and they're going to follow ICE, and they're going to report it, and I'm going to ask for volunteers. And it's like, and I'm also going to deputize you as, and these are the powers. You don't have powers of arrest. You know, you're not allowed to carry a firearm. However, you are allowed to observe any authorities and report back to it, and what you say is going to be legally binding in court. You can lay those out and set those down on record. And
Yeah.
that could be an emergency power the governor does. You declare a state emergency, go, okay, I'm doing this. And then while they're fighting it out in court, whether it's legal, who cares? Right.
Right, because he's already done it. Right.
Yeah, you've done it and you send them out, right? And you say you give them state resources, right? You know, you give them trucks and you give them like things that identify for the state of Minnesota. So now it's like you've put this to where it's not all on these powerless citizens. Now you're using the apparatus of the state to go after, like, to basically try to check federal authority. And you've ratcheted it up. And now, so people in Washington go, man, we got to tone this temperature down before it gets too wild, you know? But you don't have governors like that. That's the problem, right? Is a lot of them like, I want to be president. Okay, well, show me then, dude. Right?
Right, and it's not with going on a podcast, Gavin Newsom, and saying that you don't agree with trans people. Fuck you for that forever. First
Yeah, or he just went on with Ben Shapiro and said, "Well, I went across the line when I said ICE was terrorists." It's like, yeah, goodbye, dude.
Yeah,
Or
no, fuck you forever. Yeah.
right,
It's
and
just yeah.
yeah, no, it's like, and that's it. Is you don't like the it. I mean, the first governor to, you know, like that's the problem is they keep thinking someone else, some other entity is going to stop this, whether it's the courts or it's this or it's that. It's like, no, dude, you have some power. And it's like, well, the governor of Minnesota can't do that. Cool. Take me to court, bro.
Right, exactly, like, and I think too that, like, creating a volunteer situation really ends that situation, because then you're forcing the infringement of First Amendment rights of veterans and other, like, if you have a volunteer peacekeeping force
Yeah.
of off-duty police officers, of veterans who are all like, "No, we know," of sheriffs, of people who have had any kind of security, training, to be, like, standing on that line unarmed, and with body cams so that they have free hands. Jesus Christ, people, if you're observing ICE, please get a body cam or a Garmin, because you should not be out there with your phones like this, because I'm just saying it leaves you strategically in a fucked situation where your vision is obscured. I mean, there are
Mhm.
all sorts of things about that, not to mention the fact that your shit is not going to a cloud, right? Anyway, I digress. I
No,
digress.
but
But
no, son. But that's the thing is suddenly instead of just citizens that pop up at random filming you, now you have a state entity, right, that is following you and observing you, and that is
right.
like now you as the ICE agent are like, oh shit, like man, I could be fucking sued. Like if it, I mean, here's the thing: if it were me, and like this old school kind of governor stuff, I'd like to see is like if Christy Nome, because you can't arrest the president, but if Christy Nome visits your state, get some of your people in the state police to say fucking
Yeah.
arrest her. It's like you can't arrest the president. Yeah, she's not. She's secretary. She's cabinet secretary. She's a government
Yeah.
employee. Arrest her. And then you cause a stink. And it's like, you can't do that. Yeah, I did it though.
Yeah.
Because she sent an unlawful, she's responsible for Nagid's murder. And then fight it out in court. And now it's like, oh, do you want to ratchet it up some more? Because then I'll start arresting Bovino. I'll arrest him. And I'll arrest anybody that gets in my way. And now suddenly you've changed the battleground. Now you got to fight in a different arena, which Trump will be like, oh, I get to fight on TV and in the court. Okay, I'll do that because that's the lazier option. And now
I mean, maybe.
you spared your citizens from getting beaten and brutalized and killed. That's what you're supposed to do as a leader. You need to
Yeah.
shift your focus onto your arena where you can fight instead of going to your citizens and like, just be more peaceful. Don't play into his hands. No,
Right.
dude,
Right.
you're asking them to take fire. That's
Right.
not right. You
Especially if
know?
they're going door to door. Well, I think the thing is, and I mean this in well, maybe I mean this with my whole chest, and I'm just going to not say it apologetically. Like I am somebody who has, as you know, is like a working class person, so like I have some opinions about how we elect politicians, because we do this thing where it's like, oh, elect me, I'm a business person, oh, elect me, right, I've got an Ivy League degree. And when you create this sort of situation, I know that Walls is different. He's like a middle school principal, so it's a
Yeah,
little bit different here. But he still has this sort of like administrative carefulness to him,
he
that we
does.
curate in politicians, and nobody is going to step to a fucking bully if that is where they come from. They're just not, right?
Nope.
And so that's really it really pisses me off. Like Jesse the Body Ventura, like I would love to see what his what his pitch is. What's he gonna do? But I don't know if you've seen the interviews with him in Minnesota, but I have appreciated at least his lack of filter and his very clear diagnosis of what is happening. About like what's happening on the streets of Minnesota. But yeah, like we need courage, and
I
that
mean,
is
I come from the leadership school of like, I'm not gonna ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself. And while you can't do that at certain levels, it's like, ICE is in Minneapolis. It's like, okay, like, could you get your ass up, leave a mobile command post or leave the governor's mansion or whatever, and you head down to a protest where there's ICE and you get on a bullhorn and say, this is Governor Waltz. You know, you guys need to get the hell out of here. Stop harassing these citizens. You know,
yeah,
do that. Like going on TV and giving speeches, all that's fine. You're not at that place anymore. We're
right.
not there anymore.
Well,
Now's the time to actually do something.
yeah, and I have some spicier views on I have articulated them on my page. They're spicy in a different way, where other people are talking about 2A stuff and getting in the streets with pew pews, which I think is a dumbass idea strategically. And maybe this idea is a dumbass strategically, but I personally feel like if ICE is rolling into your neighborhood and you don't want to be forced onto a battlefield with ICE. So what I would personally be doing, and yes, will you get cited? Is it technically illegal? Sure, the fuck it is. But so is the shit that they're doing. So what I would suggest is that people start skilling and drilling neighborhood defense situations where all they simply do is go out there with their cars and fucking park them in the streets so that ICE can't get in there. There are not enough fucking tow trucks in the city to tow it, and you just park them in your neighborhood while they are there so that they can't do their fucking operations and they're not pulling you onto their battlefield. And then you can actually do the work of not only taking care of your neighbors but helping to temporarily disappear the people who are being targeted. It's a delay tactic that works. It's nonviolent. It doesn't go onto the battlefield that they want you on, and then they look fucking stupid because then they've got to get the four city or tow truck drivers who are like meh, meh, every single fucking truck. So I mean, like, I'm not saying, I feel like while protests are important in certain situations, simply standing up over and over again to be brutalized, without any purpose and any organization feels to me to be short-sighted. And I think the problem is that we have done such an excellent job of dismissing organizers and the work that they do, that we don't have a fucking plan outside of vote and
No,
call your
and that's the thing is, like, that's why we're in this new moment because most Americans have never had, like, in generations, have never had to think of this. I mean, another thing could be like, do you have, neighbors who are at risk? Are they people of color? Are they, maybe immigrants, first, second generation? If ICE is rolling through your neighborhood, tell them to come over to your house if you look like me, right?
right.
And then when ICE
Exactly.
comes over and is like, "Hey, who do you have in there?" It's like, "None of your fucking business. Go away." Well, we have a warrant. Is it a judicial warrant? Is it for me specifically? Because if it's not, get the fuck off my property.
Right. Well, and they're
You know?
trying to tell people, "Oh, you're harboring," and it's like, "Oh, am I? Because you don't really know who the fuck is in my house." And that's the other thing is I think that there need to be, frankly, some digital literacy information because what is
Right.
happening right now, and this is very clear, and this feels very personal to me because I don't think that it is an accident that ICE just so happens to be arresting so many leaders of the resistance as they're doing these violent arrests.
Mhm.
My friend Alia was just brutally arrested. Her car window smashed, her seatbelt cut. She was ripped out of the car. She's like, "I have a traumatic brain injury."
Oh, was that okay? Yeah.
I went to grad school with her. And she
Wow.
is a cool ass person, and she is also a queer Pakistani American woman who has dedicated her life to organizing in communities, not only around police brutality, but also diversity and equity and inclusion. And I do not believe that it is an accident that they went after her. And this gets back to my point about digital literacy. Our phones and driving around with them is just simply like a little leash. They're following your blue dots. And if you don't think that they're using AI to identify who the organizers are in your communities,
No, yeah,
like,
that's the other thing too. I'm
stand
gonna
the
write a
target.
piece on how to be a revolutionary, like, like non-violently, which is like rule one: if you go to a protest, bring a burner. Don't
Right,
bring your
and
phone.
I feel like if you are an organizer and if you are an immigrant, you should be turning off your phone, putting it in a fucking Faraday bag, and putting it somewhere the hell else, and start using a burner phone now, because
Yep,
what we need to be doing is moving in liminal spaces so that ICE cannot track you
yep,
or
and
have
that's
a
it.
harder time doing it. Because, I mean, literally, the whole reason why they are a and we learned this, I mean, I'm just gonna say this, we learned this from Palestine. The Palestinians were like, I mean, we see the operations that came out of there, like "Where's Daddy?" Where they would literally follow a guy until he came home to create maximum damage, right, in a battlefield not even a battlefield, just attack a family. I don't even wanna say battlefield here. So I guess what I'm saying is, if we know that, we need to take that information and be like, "Hey, maybe this is the time to yeet my cell phone into the abyss and get a dumb flip phone."
Might be
Especially if I'm a
time.
target.
This is a great conversation. I gotta jump, but,
For sure.
yeah, as always, we gotta have more of these because
Yeah,
I think it's I think we're heading into a new phase of our politics, and people need to think about resistance in different ways, not just Second Amendment solutions, but what you can do more effectively, and it's going to be more in your community.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
these politicians now, they're not going to save us.
No, they're
Yeah.
not because they don't have the skill set to do it. They literally have succeeded in a system that is now eating itself alive, you know? So,
Yep.
it's, yeah, so, if folks are interested in that, come follow me, come follow Fred. But the thing is that like I want to have these conversations. I want to have them with you. I want to have them with anyone who will listen because I feel like this is a situation where there's critical literacy about how we can engage peacefully and actually slow down this situation. And it simply takes people getting that information because, as Erica Chenoweth and other people who study nonviolent movements have pointed out, it is the lack of literacy that is one of the key detriments to being able to stand up to fascism, like lack of literacy of how to do it.
You want to know what's messed up? And this is why I can't stay in corporate media at this point. I can't remember who did this, but they had a picture of your friend and it said, "Are liberal women too combative?" Bro, they broke her window. She was going to a doctor's appointment. That's not being combative. She literally said, "I have to go to a doctor's appointment."
Right, and what they're really saying is we wanna live in a world where if we tell a woman to do something and she doesn't smile and do it immediately, then we get to shoot her out of the face, we need to pull her out of the car, we need to put her in the fucking hospital, which is what happened to my friend, by the way. Like, she
Yeah.
lost consciousness.
Yeah. I read about it. I was like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
freaking,
So
we are being terrorized by weak, horrible men. And it
right,
pisses me
and
off.
there are strategies that we can engage in to absolutely shut this down, so I look forward to our next conversation. You just let me know when that is, and I'll be there.
You got it. Hey, everybody, thank you for tuning in. I'll catch y'all
Thank
later.
you. Alright.
Bye bye.